Wine exploded across ivory silk like blood across snow. The room froze. Dr. Amara Vale didn't flinch. She grabbed another glass and poured it deliberately down the socialite's designer gown. Gasps rippled through the penthouse ballroom. Then a voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Celine." The crowd parted for Lucien Kael, a man whose power made millionaires nervous. He studied the wine-stained doctor for 3 seconds before striking his own sister across the face. The slap echoed like a gunshot. That was the moment Amara's quiet life ended, and the war for her heart began. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay with me until the end. Hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down hard against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Obsidian Tower penthouse, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and red 40 stories below. Inside, the air smelled like expensive perfume and barely concealed ambition. Crystal chandeliers threw cold light across marble floors while waiters in black moved silently between clusters of people who smiled too wide and laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Dr. Amara Vale stood near the windows holding a champagne flute she hadn't touched, watching the storm outside and wondering why she'd said yes to coming here at all. She didn't belong at events like this. Not really. These people, draped in designer labels and family names that opened doors before they even knocked, they spoke a language she'd never learned. Money as identity. Status as oxygen. Every conversation felt like a transaction she hadn't agreed to. But her mentor, Dr. Helena Park, had insisted. "You need to be seen," Helena had said over coffee 3 days ago. "You're brilliant, Amara, but brilliance in an operating room doesn't mean anything if the board doesn't know your face." So here she was, 28 years old, one of the youngest trauma surgeons at Crescent General Hospital, wearing an ivory silk dress that cost a month's rent and already counting the minutes until she could leave. She adjusted the thin strap on her shoulder and caught her reflection in the dark glass. Exhaustion lived behind her eyes even when she smiled. 12-hour surgeries did that. So did carrying the weight of other people's lives on her hands while pretending it didn't follow her home at night. "Dr. Vale." Amara turned. A woman in her 50s stood beside her holding a martini, her gray hair pulled back tight, her expression sharp and assessing. Margaret Chen, one of the hospital's major donors, wealthy enough to have an entire wing named after her late husband. "Mrs. Chen." Amara straightened slightly, forcing herself into professional warmth. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I wouldn't miss it." Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Though I'm surprised to see you. You usually avoid these things." "Dr. Park thought it would be good for me to show my face." "Helena's smart." Margaret sipped her drink, studying Amara like she was deciding whether to buy her. "You've been making quite the impression at Crescent. That gunshot case last month, the teenager everyone said wouldn't make it. I heard you stayed in surgery for 16 hours. 15, Amar corrected quietly. And it wasn't just me, the whole trauma team. Don't do that. Margaret's tone sharpened. Don't minimize yourself. It's unbecoming. Amara blinked. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. You're talented. You're young. You're a woman in a field that still treats you like a guest instead of a surgeon. Own it. Because if you don't, someone else will take credit for your work and you'll spend the next 20 years wondering why you're still in attending while mediocre men become chiefs. The words landed like a diagnosis. Amara opened her mouth to respond, but Margaret was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd with the ease of someone who'd learned how to weaponize exits. Amara exhaled slowly and took a sip of champagne she didn't want. This was exactly why she hated these events. Everyone had advice. Everyone had opinions. Everyone wanted to tell her how to navigate a world they'd never had to fight through themselves. She turned back toward the windows, watching the rain, and decided she'd stay exactly 20 more minutes. Long enough to be polite. Short enough to escape before anyone else cornered her with unsolicited career coaching. That's when she heard the laughter. It wasn't the polite kind. It was sharp, cruel, the kind that drew blood. Amara glanced over her shoulder. A woman stood near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by a small circle of admirers, mid-30s, blonde, draped in diamonds that caught the light like knives. Celine Voss. Amara recognized her from hospital gossip, socialite, trust fund, professional party circuit, the kind of woman who treated charity galas like competitive sport. Celine was holding court, gesturing dramatically with a wine glass in one hand, her voice loud enough to carry across the room. And then she actually tried to tell me the dress was vintage, Celine said, rolling her eyes, as if wearing someone else's leftovers makes you interesting instead of desperate. The group around her laughed on cue. Amara looked away. None of her business. She checked her phone. 43 minutes since she'd arrived. Close enough. She could leave now without being rude. She started toward the exit, weaving carefully between clusters of people, keeping her head down, already composing the polite text she'd send Helena later about why she'd left early. Then someone grabbed her arm. "Excuse me." Amara stopped. Celine Voss stood directly in front of her, blocking her path, wine glass still in hand. Up close, her smile looked thin and deliberate, calculated. "I'm sorry," Amara said carefully. "Do I know you?" "Not yet." Celine's eyes traveled down Amara's dress slowly, assessing, judging. "But I know you. Dr. Amara Vale, right? Helena Park's little protege." The way she said little made Amara's jaw tighten. "I'm a colleague," Amara corrected evenly. "Not a protege." "Right." Celine's smile widened. "Of course. I'm sure you earned everything you have all on your own." The words hung in the air like smoke. Amara felt the shift immediately. The way conversations nearby slowed. The way eyes turned toward them. This wasn't accidental. Celine had been waiting for her. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Amara said quietly, keeping her voice steady. "But I don't think we have anything to discuss." She moved to step around Celine. That's when the wine came. It happened fast, too fast to dodge. Crimson liquid exploded across the front of Amara's ivory dress, soaking through silk, cold and sharp against her skin. The glass slipped from Celine's hand, perfectly choreographed, and shattered against the marble floor. The ballroom went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. 100 pairs of eyes locked onto Amara standing frozen in the center of the room, wine dripping down her dress like evidence. Celine gasped loudly, covering her mouth with one hand. "Oh my God," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean these floors are so slippery. I just—" She reached out like she was going to help, her smile barely hidden beneath the performance. Amara stared down at the stains spreading across her dress, felt the weight of 100 stares pressing against her skin, felt the humiliation crawling up her throat, and something inside her snapped. She looked up, met Celine's eyes, then calmly reached over to a passing waiter, plucked a fresh glass of red wine from his tray, and poured it directly down the front of Celine's designer gown. The room gasped. Celine's mouth fell open in shock, wine soaking through white fabric, diamonds glittering uselessly against ruined silk. Amara set the empty glass down on a nearby table, her voice low and steady. Never confuse silence with weakness. She turned to leave. That's when the voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. "Celine!" The atmosphere changed instantly. The crowd parted without being asked. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the waiters stopped moving. Lucien Kael walked through the ballroom with the kind of calm that made powerful people nervous. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that looked expensive without trying. His face was unreadable. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, the kind of stillness that suggested violence lived just beneath the surface. Amara had never seen him before, but she recognized power when it entered a room. Celine immediately pointed at Amara, her voice rising in indignation. "Lucien, she just attacked me, poured wine all over my dress for no reason." Lucien didn't even glance at his sister. His eyes locked onto Amara instead. He studied her face for 3 long seconds, read the wine staining her dress, the shattered glass at her feet, the exhaustion and anger barely contained behind her calm expression. Then he turned to Celine and struck her across the face. The slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Celine stumbled back, hand flying to her cheek, eyes wide with shock. The crowd collectively held its breath. Lucien's voice was cold, controlled. "You embarrass this family again," he said quietly, "and you answer to me." He turned back to Amara. Something shifted in his expression, something softer, almost gentle. "I apologize for my sister," he said. "She forgets her manners." Amara stared at him, heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond to a man who'd just publicly struck his own sister to defend a stranger. Her voice caught. I didn't need you to do that. I know. His eyes held hers. But she needed to learn. Then he stepped aside, clearing a path to the exit. Amara walked past him without another word, feeling his gaze follow her all the way to the elevator. Behind her, the ballroom exploded into whispers. What? Amara sat in the back of a cab 20 minutes later, still shaking. Not from fear, from rage. She'd spent years building her career, years proving herself in operating rooms where older surgeons second-guessed her decisions, years swallowing condescension and smiling through dismissals and working twice as hard for half the recognition. And in one night, Celine Voss had tried to humiliate her in front of the most powerful people in the city. For what? Entertainment? Amara pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the rain blur the city lights into streaks of color. She didn't cry. She never cried. But she wanted to. Her phone buzzed. Helena Park. Amara answered. Are you okay? Helena's voice was tight with concern. Margaret just called me. She said, I'm fine. Amara's voice came out flat. I'm going home. Amara, listen to me. What Celine did was disgusting, but Lucien Kael publicly defending you. Do you understand what that means? It means I'm now tangled up with people I don't want anything to do with. Helena sighed. Lucien Kael owns half the real estate in this city. His family controls shipping, security, finance. He's not someone you walk away from easily. I'm a surgeon, Helena, not a socialite. I don't care about his empire. Maybe not, but he clearly cares about you. Amara hung up. Makik. 3 days later, Lucien Kael walked into Crescent General Hospital. Amara was in the middle of post-op rounds when she saw him standing near the nurse's station, hands in his pockets, scanning the hallway like he owned it. Her stomach dropped. She ducked into the nearest supply closet and pulled out her phone, texting one of the residents. Tell the man in black I'm in surgery. All day. 2 minutes later, her phone buzzed. He says he'll wait. Amara closed her eyes and counted to 10. Fine. She stepped out of the closet, walked straight to the nurse's station, and stopped 3 feet away from Lucien Kael. You can't be here, she said quietly. This is a hospital, not a social club. Lucien looked at her. Up close, his eyes were darker than she remembered, tired, like he hadn't slept in days. My grandmother had surgery yesterday, he said calmly. I came to check on her. Amara blinked. She's on the cardiac floor, 3rd wing. You're in trauma. I know. He didn't move. I wanted to see you first. Why? Because I owe you an apology. Amara crossed her arms. You already apologized. At the gala. Not for Celine. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. For hitting her in front of you. That wasn't... I shouldn't have done that. Amara studied his face, trying to read him. You regret defending me? I regret the method. His jaw tightened, but not the intent. Silence stretched between them. Amara exhaled slowly. Your grandmother, she said finally. What's her name? Elara Kael. I'll check on her. Amara turned to leave. But after that, we're done. I don't need complications in my life. Neither do I. She stopped, looked back over her shoulder. Lucien's expression was unreadable. But you walked into my head 3 days ago, he said quietly, and I haven't been able to think about anything else since. Amara's heart stuttered. She forced herself to turn away, walking down the hallway without responding, but she felt his eyes on her the entire way. Bats. Lucien's grandmother was recovering well. Amara checked her charts, adjusted her medication, and spent 20 minutes answering questions about post-surgical care. Elara Kael was sharp, elegant, and far too observant. You're the one from the gala, Elara said suddenly, her eyes narrowing. The doctor my grandson defended. Amara hesitated. I didn't realize you knew about that. Everyone knows about that. Elara smiled faintly. Lucien doesn't defend people. Not publicly. Not ever. Maybe he just hates his sister. Elara laughed, a dry, knowing sound. He does, she admitted. But that's not why he hit her. Amara didn't respond. Alara leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. My grandson is dangerous, Dr. Vale. He's built an empire on control and fear and calculated violence. But he's also capable of extraordinary loyalty to the people he chooses to protect. She paused. He chose you, whether you want that or not. Amara's throat tightened. I didn't ask for it. No one ever does. Alara's eyes softened. But if you're smart, you'll decide quickly whether you're going to walk away or step closer, because Lucien doesn't do halfway. But Amara left the hospital that night through the back exit, exhausted and overthinking everything. Lucien was waiting by her car. She stopped 10 feet away, keys in hand. This is starting to feel like stalking, she said evenly. It's persistence. He pushed off the car, hands in his pockets. There's a difference. Not legally. He almost smiled. Amara sighed. What do you want, Mr. Kael? Lucien. He stepped closer. And I want to buy you coffee. I don't drink coffee after 6. Tea then. I don't drink tea either. Water. Despite herself, Amara felt the corner of her mouth twitch. You're not going to give up, are you? No. She studied him for a long moment. He looked tired, genuinely tired, like he carried the weight of something heavy and hadn't put it down in years. Against every instinct screaming at her to walk away, Amara heard herself say, 1 hour. That's it. Lucien's expression softened. 1 hour, he agreed. They ended up at a quiet diner 3 blocks from the hospital, sitting across from each other in a corner booth while rain drummed against the windows. Amara ordered decaf coffee, despite what she'd said earlier. Lucien ordered nothing. You're not eating? She asked. I'm not hungry. Then why suggest coffee? Because I wanted to talk to you. He leaned back against the booth, studying her. And you wouldn't have agreed to dinner. Smart. Calculated. Amara stirred cream into her coffee slowly, watching him. Why are you really here? She asked. And don't say it's because I walked into your head. That's not an answer. Lucien was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because you poured wine on my sister without hesitating. Because you didn't apologize. Because you looked at me like I wasn't someone to be afraid of. He paused. Most people don't do that. Maybe most people are smarter than me. Or maybe you're braver than them. Amara looked away, uncomfortable with the weight of his attention. I'm not brave, she said quietly. I'm just tired of people thinking silence means submission. I know. His voice softened. I saw that the second you looked at Celine. They sat in silence for a while, the diner humming softly around them. Finally, Amara asked the question that had been sitting in her chest since the gala. Why did you hit her? Lucien didn't flinch, because she humiliated you publicly. And in my family, that's unforgivable. Even for your own sister? Especially for my own sister. His jaw tightened. Celine spent her entire life thinking cruelty is a personality trait. Someone needed to teach her otherwise. And you think violence was the answer? I think she understood it faster than words. Amara set her coffee down, leaning forward slightly. I don't need you to fight my battles, she said carefully. I can handle myself. I believe you. Lucien held her gaze. But that doesn't mean you should have to. Something shifted in the air between them. Amara felt it. The pull. The dangerous curiosity. She stood abruptly, grabbing her coat. I need to go. Lucien didn't argue. He just stood, walking her to the door. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Amara pulled her coat tighter, keys in hand. Thank you for the coffee, she said, not meeting his eyes. Amara. She looked up. Lucien's expression was unreadable in the dim streetlight. If you want me to stay away, he said quietly, tell me now, and I will. Amara opened her mouth. The word should have been easy. Stay away, leave me alone, I don't want this. But they wouldn't come, because somewhere between the gala and the diner, between the wine and the hospital hallway, and the way he looked at her like she mattered, she'd stopped wanting him to leave, and that terrified her more than anything. I don't know what I want, she whispered finally. Lucien stepped closer. Then let me help you figure it out. He reached up slowly, brushing a strand of wet hair away from her face. His hand was warm, steady. Amara's breath caught. Then headlights flooded the street, breaking the moment. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. A woman stepped out, blonde, beautiful, dressed in a designer coat that probably cost more than Amara's car. Her eyes locked onto Lucien immediately, sharp with possession. "Lucien." Her voice was cold, controlled. "We need to talk." Lucien's entire body went rigid. Amara felt him pull away, not physically, but emotionally, like a door slamming shut. "Not now, Evelina," he said flatly. Evelina's eyes slid to Amara, assessing her in one brutal glance. "So this is her," Evelina said softly. "The little doctor everyone's talking about." Amara's stomach twisted. "I should go," she said quietly, stepping back. "No." Lucien's voice was sharp. "Stay." But Evelina was already moving closer, her smile thin and dangerous. "Did he tell you about me?" she asked Amara sweetly. "About us?" Amara looked between them, her chest tightening. "Who are you?" Evelina's smile widened. "His fiancée." The word hit Amara like a punch. She looked at Lucien, waiting for him to deny it. He didn't. His silence was answer enough. Amara stepped back, keys clutched in her hand, her voice steady despite the betrayal twisting through her chest. "Don't contact me again." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Lucien standing in the rain with the ghost of a woman he'd never let go. Behind her, Evelina's laughter echoed through the empty street like broken glass. Amara drove home through rain that had turned vicious, her hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm that matched the pounding in her chest, and every red light felt like the city was forcing her to sit with what had just happened. His fiancée. The words kept replaying in her head like a song she couldn't turn off. She'd been so careful, spent years building walls around herself after the last relationship had slowly bled her dry. A man who'd promised her the world and delivered nothing but excuses and emotional neglect, until she'd finally walked away hollow and exhausted. And here she was again, falling for a man who'd looked at her like she mattered while hiding an entire life behind his back. She parked in the underground garage of her building, killed the engine, and sat in the dark listening to the rain hammer against the concrete above her. Her phone buzzed. Lucien. She didn't open it. It buzzed again and again. On the fourth buzz, she turned the phone off completely and got out of the car. Her apartment was small and quiet, the kind of space that felt safe precisely because nobody else lived there. She dropped her keys on the counter, peeled off her coat, and stood in the dark kitchen for a long time doing absolutely nothing. Then she poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink and finally let the exhaustion hit her. Not tears, just bone-deep tiredness, the kind that came from realizing you'd been stupid enough to hope again. Lucien stood in the rain long after Amara disappeared around the corner, his jaw locked tight, fury coiling through his chest like barbed wire. Evelina stood beside her SUV, arms crossed, that infuriating smile still plastered across her face. "That went well," she said lightly. Lucien turned on her. "Get in the car." "Excuse me?" "Get in the car." His voice was deadly quiet. "Before I do something we'll both regret." Evelina's smile faltered. She got in. Lucien slid into the back seat beside her and slammed the door hard enough to make the driver flinch. The SUV pulled away from the curb, and for 30 seconds nobody spoke. Then Lucien broke the silence with a voice like ice. "What the hell was that?" Evelina adjusted her coat, smoothing invisible wrinkles. "I was protecting you." "From what?" "From making a mistake." She turned to face him, her expression sharp. "You think I don't know what's happening? You've been obsessed with that doctor since the gala. Everyone's talking about it, Lucien. Your sister, your board members. People are starting to wonder if you've lost control." "I never had control over you." His eyes bored into hers. "We ended 2 years ago, Evelina. You don't get to call yourself my fiancée anymore." "Technically, we never formally ended the engagement." "I caught you in bed with another man." Lucien's voice was flat, brutal. "That ended it." Evelina flinched. For a moment, something raw flickered across her face. Shame, maybe, or regret. But it disappeared just as quickly behind the mask she wore so well. "That was a mistake," she said quietly. I was confused, lost. You were always working, always focused on the business, and you fucked someone else. Lucien cut her off. Multiple people, actually, for years. Don't rewrite history to make yourself feel better. Evelina's jaw tightened. I made mistakes, Lucien, I admit that. But so did you. You were never emotionally available. You treated our relationship like another business deal you had to manage. So yes, I looked elsewhere for what you couldn't give me. Then why are you here now? The question hung between them like a blade. Evelina looked away, staring out the rain-streaked window. Because I miss you, she whispered. Because I realized too late what I had. And because watching you look at that doctor the way you used to look at me, it made me understand I never actually let you go. Lucien laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You don't get to miss me, he said quietly. You don't get to show up 2 years later and ruin something good because you're finally feeling the consequences of your choices. Something good? Evelina's voice sharpened. You've known her for a week, Lucien. You don't even know her. I know she doesn't lie to me. The words landed like a slap. Evelina's expression hardened. Fine, she said coldly. Go chase your little trauma surgeon. But when she realizes who you really are, what you've done, the blood on your hands, she'll run just like everyone else does. Lucien leaned closer, his voice dropping to something deadly. If you ever approach her again, he said softly, if you ever speak to her, look at her, or breathe in her direction, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Do you understand me? Evelina held his gaze for 3 long seconds. Then she nodded once. Lucien got out of the SUV at the next red light and walked into the rain without looking back. 3 days passed. Amara threw herself into work with the kind of intensity that made her colleagues worry. 16-hour shifts, back-to-back surgeries. She stayed late reviewing charts that didn't need reviewing and arrived early to rounds that didn't start for another hour. Anything to keep her mind occupied, anything to avoid thinking about Lucien Kael standing in the rain looking at her like she'd mattered. Helena cornered her in the break room on the 4th day, arms crossed, expression stern. You look like hell, Helena said bluntly. Thanks. Amara poured herself coffee that had been sitting too long and tasted like burnt rubber. Always nice to hear. I'm serious, Amara. You're running yourself into the ground. I'm fine. You operated on a subdural hematoma for 6 hours yesterday and then stayed to observe the patient overnight when the residents could have handled it. That's not fine. That's avoidance. Amara set the coffee down harder than necessary. What do you want me to say, Helena? That I'm upset? That I feel stupid for letting my guard down with someone I barely knew? Fine. I'm upset. I feel stupid. Can we move on now? Helena's expression softened. What happened? Nothing happened. That's the problem. Amar's voice cracked slightly. I don't know what I thought. That maybe this time would be different. That maybe I'd met someone who actually saw me instead of just using me to fill whatever hole they had in their life. Lucien Kael doesn't strike me as the type who needs anyone to fill holes. No. Amar's laugh was bitter. He's already got an ex-fiancée doing that for him. Helena winced. Did he explain? I didn't give him the chance. Amara grabbed her coffee and headed for the door. And I'm not going to. She left before Helena could respond. Lucien tried calling 17 times over 4 days. Amara didn't answer once. He showed up at the hospital twice. She had security escort him out. He sent flowers to her apartment. She left them in the hallway for her neighbors. By the 5th day, he stopped trying, and somehow that felt worse than the calls. Amara told herself she was relieved, told herself this was exactly what she wanted, distance, clarity, a return to the life she'd built before Lucien Kael walked into it. But late at night, alone in her apartment with the city glowing through her windows, she caught herself checking her phone, waiting for a call that didn't come, hating herself for wanting it. Wag. Celine showed up at the hospital on day 6. Amara was reviewing patient charts at the nurse's station when she felt someone watching her. She looked up and found Celine standing 10 feet away, hands clasped in front of her, looking smaller somehow. Uncertain. Amara's stomach dropped. You need to leave, she said quietly. I know. Celine didn't move. I just, I need to talk to you, please, 5 minutes. I don't have 5 minutes. Then 2. Amara stared at her, weighing options. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to refuse, to make Celine feel even a fraction of the humiliation she'd inflicted at the gala. But something in Celine's expression stopped her. She looked genuinely afraid. 2 minutes, Amara said finally. Outside. They walked to a small courtyard behind the hospital, away from patients and staff. The sky was gray and heavy, threatening rain. Celine wrapped her arms around herself like she was cold despite the mild temperature. I'm sorry, Celine said immediately. For the gala, for the wine, for everything. Amara crossed her arms. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? I don't. Celine flinched but didn't look away. I don't expect you to, she said quietly. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong. About you. About everything. She paused, swallowing hard. Lucien told me what Evelina said to you about the engagement. Amara's jaw tightened. I don't want to talk about your brother. I know, but you need to hear this. Celine stepped closer, her voice urgent. Evelina lied. The engagement ended 2 years ago when Lucien found out she'd been cheating on him. For years. He never exposed her publicly because he didn't want to destroy her reputation, but he cut her out of his life completely. Until last week when she found out about you. Amara's heart was pounding now, but she kept her voice level. Why are you telling me this? Because my brother doesn't care about people easily. Celine's eyes were bright with something that looked like desperation. He's cold and controlled and terrifying most of the time, but when he does care, when he actually lets someone in, he's loyal to the point of self-destruction. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He lied to me. He didn't lie. He just didn't get the chance to explain before Evelina twisted everything. Celine's voice broke slightly. Please, just talk to him. Let him tell you the truth. Amara was quiet for a long moment, her chest tight. Why do you care? She asked finally. You hated me a week ago. I didn't hate you. Celine looked away, shame coloring her voice. I hated that you made me feel small, that you stood up to me when nobody else does, that Lucien defended you instead of me. She paused. But mostly, I hated myself for being the kind of person who attacks strangers to feel powerful, and I'm trying to be better. The honesty in her voice caught Amara off guard. She studied Celine's face, looking for the mask, the performance, the cruelty she'd seen at the gala. But all she saw was a woman trying to apologize. I need time, Amara said finally. To think. Celine nodded quickly. Of course. Thank you for listening. She turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think you're the best thing that's happened to my brother in a long time. Maybe ever. Then she walked away, leaving Amara standing alone in the courtyard with rain starting to fall around her. That night, Amara sat in her apartment staring at her phone. Lucien's last text was from 3 days ago. I'm sorry for everything. If you ever want to hear the truth, I'm here. She'd read it 40 times since then. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then she set the phone down and forced herself to walk away. Not yet. She wasn't ready yet. 2 days later, everything changed. Amara was leaving the hospital late, nearly midnight, exhausted from a brutal shift that had included 2 emergency surgeries and a code blue that had lasted 40 minutes. She walked through the parking structure alone, keys in hand, her footsteps echoing against concrete. She didn't notice the 2 figures waiting by her car until she was 10 feet away. Evelina and Celine. Amara stopped. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs, adrenaline flooding her system instantly. Evelina smiled, cold and sharp. Dr. Vale, she said pleasantly, we need to talk. No, we don't. Amara's voice stayed steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Move away from my car. Or what? Evelina stepped closer. You'll call security? Please. By the time they get here, this conversation will be over. Celine moved to flank Amara's other side, blocking her path back to the elevator. Amara's mind raced, calculating exits, distances, options. She was alone. Late. In a parking structure with no cameras in this corner. Nobody knew she was here. What do you want? Amara asked quietly. I want you to understand something. Evelina's voice was soft, deadly. Lucien Kael belongs to me. He always has. And whatever little fantasy you've been building in your head about him, it ends tonight. I'm not interested in your ex-fiancé. Liar! Evelina's eyes flashed. You've been avoiding him for a week because you care. Because he got under your skin. And that's the problem. She pulled something from her coat pocket. A knife. Small. Folding. The kind someone might carry for self-defense. Amara's stomach dropped, but she didn't move. You're going to leave him alone, Evelina continued, her voice eerily calm. You're going to stop working at this hospital. You're going to disappear from his life completely. And if you don't... She let the threat hang in the air. Amara looked between them, heart hammering. Celine looked uncertain now, her earlier confidence cracking. Evelina, Celine said quietly, this isn't... We talked about scaring her, not... Shut up. Evelina didn't take her eyes off Amara. You wanted to help. So help. Hold her. Celine hesitated. Then she grabbed Amara's arm. That's when Amara moved. Years ago, during her second year of medical school, a man had followed her home from the library. He'd cornered her in an alley, put his hands on her, tried to drag her into the dark. She'd frozen, terrified, helpless. He'd gotten 3 steps before someone else intervened, but those 3 steps had lived in Amara's nightmares for months afterward. After that night, she'd made herself a promise. Nobody would ever overpower her again. She'd spent 2 years training in Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and boxing. Not for sport, for survival. She'd learned how to break holds, how to target vulnerabilities, how to fight dirty when fighting clean wasn't an option. And now, with Celine's hand locked around her arm and Evelina stepping closer with a knife, every hour of training came flooding back. Amara twisted hard, breaking Celine's grip with a sharp elbow strike that sent her stumbling backward. Before Evelina could react, Amara closed the distance, grabbed her wrist, and twisted the knife away with a brutal joint lock that made Evelina scream. The knife clattered to the concrete. Evelina swung wildly with her free hand. Amara ducked, drove her shoulder into Evelina's chest, and swept her legs out from under her. Evelina hit the ground hard, the air punching out of her lungs. Celine lunged forward, trying to grab Amara from behind. Amara spun, caught Celine's arm, and used her momentum to flip her over her hip. Celine crashed onto the concrete beside Evelina with a choked gasp. The whole fight lasted maybe 20 seconds. Amara stood over them, breathing hard, adrenaline screaming through her veins. Evelina stared up at her, eyes wide with shock and pain. Celine groaned, clutching her shoulder. Amara picked up the knife, folded it closed, and slipped it into her coat pocket. Then she looked down at both of them, her voice cold and steady. If either of you ever come near me again, she said quietly, I won't stop at the ground. Do you understand? Neither of them answered. Amara turned, got into her car, and drove away without looking back. Her hands didn't start shaking until she was 3 blocks away. She didn't tell anyone. Not Helena, not security, not the police. She just went home, locked her door, and sat in the dark trying to process what had just happened. Evelina had pulled a knife on her. Celine, who'd apologized 2 days ago, had helped, and Amara had defended herself with a violence she'd spent years training for but hoped she'd never have to use. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Dr. Vale? The voice was male, unfamiliar, professional. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm head of security for Lucien Kael. I'm calling because our surveillance team flagged an incident in your hospital parking structure approximately 30 minutes ago. Amara's blood went cold. What? We have cameras monitoring the area. We saw what happened with Evelina Cross and Celine Voss. His voice was carefully neutral. Mr. Kael doesn't know yet. I'm calling to ask if you'd like to press charges before I inform him. Amara's mind raced. You've been watching me? We've been watching them, Marcus corrected. Miss Cross has been erratic since Mr. Kael ended their relationship. We've been monitoring her movements as a precaution. You just happen to be in the same location. That's not better. I'm aware. He paused. Do you want to press charges? Amara was silent for a long moment. No, she said finally. Are you sure? What they did was assault, potentially attempted murder given the weapon involved. I'm sure. Her voice was firm. "But I want you to send me the footage." "Why?" "Insurance," Amara said quietly, "in case they try again." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I'll send it within the hour," he said finally. "And Dr. Vale?" "Yes?" "Mr. Kael is going to find out about this, probably tonight. And when he does," he stopped. "Just be prepared." The line went dead. Amara sat in the dark, her heart still racing, and realized she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. This wasn't over. Not even close. Lucien found out 40 minutes later. Marcus called him at 1 in the morning with security footage that made his blood turn to ice. He watched Evelina pull a knife, watched Celine grab Amara, watched Amara fight back with precision and controlled violence that spoke of serious training, watched her walk away alone while 2 women lay on the concrete behind her, and something inside him broke. He called Marcus back immediately. "Where are they now?" "Evelina went home. Celine's at the family estate." "Get them both. I don't care what time it is. Bring them to my office. Now." "Sir." "Now, Marcus." 45 minutes later, Evelina and Celine sat in Lucien's office looking like children called to the principal. Evelina's wrist was wrapped. Celine had a bruise forming on her shoulder. Lucien stood by the window, back to them, hands in his pockets. Silent. The silence stretched for 3 full minutes. Then he turned around. His expression was empty, controlled. That's how they knew he was furious. "Explain," he said quietly. Neither of them spoke. "I have security footage," Lucien continued, his voice soft. "I watched Evelina pull a knife on an unarmed woman in a parking garage. I watched my sister help her. So I'm giving you one chance to explain before I decide what happens next." Evelina lifted her chin defiantly. She needed to understand. "You pulled a weapon on a civilian." Lucien's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You committed assault, possibly attempted murder. And you involved my sister in a crime that could destroy both of your lives." "I wasn't going to actually hurt her," Evelina said quickly. "I just wanted to scare her, to make her what?" Lucien stepped closer. "Leave me alone? Stay away from me? Do you understand how delusional that sounds? We're not together, Evelina. We haven't been together for 2 years. You don't get to threaten people on my behalf." "I was protecting you." "From what?" Lucien's voice finally rose, sharp and cutting. "From someone who makes me happy? From someone who doesn't lie to me? You're not protecting me, Evelina. You're trying to control me because you can't stand that I moved on." Evelina's eyes filled with tears. "I loved you," she whispered. "No, you didn't." Lucien's voice went cold again. "You loved what I could give you. Status, money, access. But you never loved me. Because if you had, you wouldn't have spent 3 years fucking other men behind my back." The words hung in the air like broken glass. Evelina looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. Lucien turned to Celine. "And you?" His disappointment was worse than anger. "You apologized to her. You told her you wanted to be better, and then you helped Evelina attack her 2 days later." Celine's voice was small. "I didn't know she'd bring a knife. I thought we were just going to talk." "You held her arm while Evelina threatened her with a weapon." Lucien's jaw tightened. "That's not talking. That's assault." "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this." He looked between them both. "You're lucky Amara didn't press charges. You're lucky she's a better person than either of you deserve." He walked back to his desk, pulled out his phone, and made a call. "Marcus, I need you to arrange transportation for Evelina Cross, out of the city, tonight." "Lucien, no." Evelina stood abruptly. "You can't." "You have 2 options," Lucien said flatly. "Option 1, you leave the city voluntarily and never contact me or anyone in my life again. Option 2, I press charges on Amar's behalf using the security footage, and you spend the next 5 years in prison for assault with a deadly weapon." Evelina stared at him, her face pale. "You wouldn't." "Try me." Evelina's composure finally shattered. She started crying, real tears this time, desperate and broken. "I made mistakes," she sobbed. "I know I did, but I love you, Lucien. I've always loved you. I didn't know how to show it properly. And when I saw you with her, when I realized what I'd lost..." You lost me the moment you betrayed me. Lucien's voice was final. Everything after that was just you refusing to accept it. He looked at Marcus, who'd been standing silently by the door. Get her out of here. Marcus stepped forward. Evelina didn't resist. She just walked to the door, shoulders shaking, and stopped at the threshold. You'll regret this, she said quietly, not looking back. When she leaves you too, when she realizes who you really are. You'll wish you'd chosen someone who actually understood your world. Maybe, Lucien said, but at least she won't lie to me. Evelina left without another word. Lucien turned to Celine. His sister sat hunched in her chair, staring at her hands. I don't know what to do with you, he said quietly. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I keep trying to be better. I keep promising myself I'll change. And then I do something like this and realize I'm still the same selfish, cruel person I've always been. You helped someone threaten an innocent woman with a knife. I know. You could have killed her. I know. Celine finally looked up, her eyes red. And the worst part is, I didn't even want to be there. I knew it was wrong, but Evelina said, she made it sound like we were just going to talk, like we were protecting you, and I wanted... Her voice broke. I wanted you to see that I could be useful, that I could help, that I wasn't just the embarrassment you have to manage. Lucien was quiet for a long time. Then he walked over and sat in the chair beside her. You're not an embarrassment, he said finally, his voice softer. You're my sister, and I love you, but I can't keep protecting you from the consequences of your choices. I know. You need help, Celine, real help, therapy, maybe rehab, something to figure out why you keep hurting people to feel powerful. Celine nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay, she whispered. Lucien pulled her into a hug, brief, awkward, but genuine. I'm going to arrange for you to stay at a facility outside the city, he said, somewhere quiet, safe, where you can actually work on yourself without distractions. And when you come back, if you come back, you start over, clean slate. But you have to earn it. Okay. And Celine? Yeah? If you ever go near Amara again, for any reason, you're not my sister anymore. Do you understand? Celine pulled back, looking at him with something that might have been respect. I understand. Lucien stood. Marcus will drive you home. Pack a bag. You leave tomorrow morning. After she left, Lucien stood alone in his office, staring out at the city. Dawn was starting to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and gold. He'd spent 2 years building walls around himself after Evelina's betrayal. 2 years convincing himself he was better off alone, that relationships were liabilities, that caring about someone only gave them power to destroy you. And then Amara Vale had walked into that ballroom and poured wine on his sister without hesitating. And for the first time in years, he'd felt something other than anger. He pulled out his phone, stared at her number, and finally, allowed himself to admit the truth. He was in love with her, and he had no idea if she'd ever forgive him. Amara went to work the next morning running on 3 hours of sleep and black coffee. She moved through her rounds on autopilot, checking vitals, reviewing charts, talking to patients without really hearing them. Her body ached from the fight. Her knuckles were bruised. Her shoulder throbbed where Celine had grabbed her. But she didn't stop moving. If she stopped, she'd have to think. And if she thought, she'd have to confront the fact that 2 women had attacked her last night with a knife, and she'd barely told anyone. Helena caught her in the hallway between patient rooms. You look worse than yesterday, Helena said bluntly. Bad night. Want to talk about it? Not even a little bit. Helena studied her face for a moment, then sighed. Lucien Kael is in the lobby, she said quietly. Security called me 20 minutes ago. He's been asking for you. Amara's stomach dropped. Tell him I'm busy. I already did. He said he'll wait. Then tell him I left. Amara. I don't want to see him, Helena. Amara's voice was tight. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want anything to do with him or his family or the nightmare his life has become. So please, just make him leave. Helena was quiet for a moment. What happened last night? Amara looked away. Nothing I couldn't handle. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Before Helena could respond, Amara's pager went off. Trauma incoming, GSW to the chest. 3 minutes out. Amara was already moving. I have to go. She disappeared into the chaos of the ER, grateful for the distraction, and didn't look back. Lucien waited in the hospital lobby for 4 hours. Security asked him to leave twice. He refused. Finally, around 3 in the afternoon, Amara emerged from the double doors leading to the surgical wing, still in her scrubs, exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She saw him immediately. Stopped. For 3 seconds, they just stared at each other across the lobby. Then Amara turned and walked toward the exit. Lucien followed. Amara. She didn't stop. Amara, please. She pushed through the doors into the afternoon sunlight, walking fast toward the parking structure. Lucien caught up to her, stepping into her path. We need to talk. No, we don't. Her voice was cold, controlled. Move. I know what happened last night. Amara went very still. Excuse me? Evelina, Celine, the parking garage, the knife. His jaw tightened. I have security footage. I know everything. Amara stared at him, her chest tight with something between fury and betrayal. You've been watching me. I've been watching them. His voice was urgent. Evelina's been unstable since we ended things. I had security monitoring her movements as a precaution. I didn't know she'd go after you. I swear, if I'd known, you would have what? Amara's voice rose slightly. Protected me? Defended me? Like I'm some helpless thing that needs saving? No, I would have stopped her before she ever got close to you. I stopped her myself. Amara stepped closer, her eyes blazing. I didn't need you. I didn't need anyone. I handled it. I know. Lucien's voice softened. I saw. You were... He stopped. You were incredible. Don't what? Don't try to charm me with compliments. Amara's voice shook slightly. Don't try to make this about how impressive I was. 2 women attacked me last night with a weapon because of you. Because your ex-fiancée, the woman you conveniently forgot to mention, decided I was a threat. And your sister, who apologized to me 2 days ago, helped her. Celine's gone. Evelina's gone. They're both out of the city. They won't come near you again. That's not the point. Amara's control finally cracked. The point is that your life is violent and complicated and dangerous, and I don't want any part of it. I'm a surgeon, Lucien. I save lives. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't spend my life looking over my shoulder wondering who's going to come after me next because I made the mistake of caring about you. The words hung between them like shattered glass. Lucien stood frozen, something raw and broken in his expression. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for all of it. For not telling you about Evelina sooner. For not protecting you better. For dragging you into my world when you never asked for it. Sorry doesn't fix this. I know. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. But I need you to understand something. Evelina showing up that night, calling herself my fiancée, that was a lie. We ended 2 years ago, completely, permanently, and never looked back. Until I met you. Amara looked away, her throat tight. Why didn't you tell me that when she showed up? Because I was trying to protect you from exactly this, from getting tangled up in my past, from dealing with people like Evelina who can't let go. He paused. But I realize now that keeping you in the dark only made it worse. Amara was silent for a long time. Then she looked up at him, her eyes exhausted. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. I don't know if I'm strong enough to be part of your world. You are. His voice was certain. You're the strongest person I've ever met. That's not the same as wanting to be. Lucien nodded slowly. Then tell me what you need, he said quietly. Space? Time? For me to disappear completely? Just tell me, and I'll do it. Amara studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But all she saw was exhaustion, and something that looked like hope. I need time, she said finally, to think, to process everything that's happened. And I need you to not show up at my work or call me or send flowers or any of the things you've been doing for the past week. Okay? I'm serious, Lucien. I know. He stepped back, giving her space. I'll stay away. But when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Amara nodded once, Then she walked past him toward her car, leaving him standing alone in the parking lot. She didn't look back, but she wanted to, and that terrified her more than anything else. Succeed. 2 weeks passed in careful silence. Amara worked, slept, worked some more, avoided conversations about Lucien Kael with Helena, and ignored the pitying looks from nurses who'd heard the gossip. Celine sent one text from rehab. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me." Amar deleted it without responding. Evelina sent nothing. Lucien kept his promise. No calls, no flowers, no surprise visits, just silence. And somehow the silence was worse than everything else combined, because it gave Amara space to think, to remember the way Lucien had looked at her in the diner like she was the only person in the world who mattered, to remember the gentleness in his voice when he'd asked what she needed, to remember that he'd dealt with Evelina and Celine not by excusing them, but by holding them accountable. And slowly, painfully slowly, Amara began to realize something. She missed him, not the danger, not the complications, just him, the quiet conversations, the way he listened like her words actually mattered, the way he defended her without expecting anything in return. She'd spent so long protecting herself from being hurt again that she'd forgotten what it felt like to actually want someone, to choose someone. Not because they were safe or convenient, but because they made her feel alive. On day 16, her phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. Unknown number. Amara almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Dr. Vale?" The voice was male, professional, urgent. "This is Crescent General Dispatch. We have an incoming trauma, multiple GSWs, critical condition. Patient specifically requested you." Amara sat up immediately, already reaching for her scrubs. "Who's the patient?" "Lucien Kael." Her blood went cold. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. She hung up, threw on clothes, and ran. Amara's hands were shaking when she pushed through the emergency room doors at 2:17 in the morning. The fluorescent lights burned too bright against her exhausted eyes, and the familiar smell of antiseptic and blood hit her like a physical weight. The ER was chaos. Nurses moving fast between trauma bays, monitors beeping urgent warnings, someone shouting orders across the room. The controlled pandemonium of lives hanging in the balance. Dr. Chen, the night attending, spotted her immediately. "Trauma Bay 3, he called out. "Multiple GSWs. 2 to the abdomen, 1 through and through in the shoulder. He's stable but critical. Lost a lot of blood before the paramedics got there." Amara was already moving, pulling on a surgical gown, snapping gloves over her hands with practiced efficiency. "How long ago?" 20 minutes. "We've got IV access, fluids running, typed and crossed for transfusion. But he's asking for you specifically. Won't let us sedate him until he sees you." Amara's chest tightened. She pushed through the curtain into Trauma Bay 3. Lucien lay on the gurney surrounded by medical equipment, his skin pale beneath the harsh lights, his shirt cut away to reveal bandages already soaking through with blood. His eyes were half closed, pain carved into every line of his face. But when he saw her, something shifted in his expression. Relief. "Amara." His voice was rough, weak. "You came." She moved to his side immediately, her professional mask sliding into place even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "What happened?" Her hands moved over him automatically, checking his pulse, his breathing, the placement of the IV lines. "Ambush." He winced as she pressed gently against his abdomen, checking for rigidity. "Business deal gone bad. 4 men. I got 2 of them before—" He stopped, his jaw tightening against pain. "Before they got me." "Don't talk." Amara's voice was steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Save your strength. We need to get you into surgery." "No!" His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Not yet. I need to tell you something first." "Lucien, please." His eyes locked onto hers, desperate. "In case I don't make it, you're going to make it." Her voice was firm, final. "I'm not letting you die." "Amara, I said no." She pulled her wrist free, already turning to Dr. Chen. "Get him prepped for surgery, now. I want a full trauma panel, cross-match for 6 units, and an OR ready in 5 minutes." Dr. Chen nodded and started barking orders. Lucien's hand found hers again, weaker this time. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all of it, for dragging you into my world, for not being honest sooner, for stop apologizing and start fighting. Amara squeezed his hand once, her voice softening slightly. I'll see you on the other side. Then she let go and walked out to scrub in. The surgery took 6 hours. 2 bullets had perforated his small intestine. 1 had nicked his liver. The shoulder wound was clean, through and through like Chen had said, but the internal damage was extensive. Amara worked with the kind of focused intensity that made the rest of the trauma team move around her like water around stone. Her hands were steady. Her decisions were quick and precise. She didn't allow herself to think about whose body she was operating on. Just the anatomy, the bleeding, the damage that needed repair. When they finally closed, the sun was rising outside the OR windows, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Amara stripped off her gloves, her gown, and stood at the scrub sink washing her hands for longer than necessary. Dr. Chen appeared beside her. That was impressive work, he said quietly. Most surgeons wouldn't have been able to stay that calm operating on someone they know personally. I didn't have a choice. Amara's voice was flat, empty. He needed a surgeon. I was available. Still, Chen dried his hands, studying her. You okay? No. The honesty surprised her. But I will be. She left before he could ask anything else. Lucien woke up 12 hours later in the ICU with tubes running out of his body and pain medication making everything feel distant and soft. Amara sat in a chair beside his bed, still in her scrubs, her head tipped back against the wall, eyes closed. Not asleep, just exhausted. Hey. His voice came out like gravel. Her eyes opened immediately. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then Amara leaned forward, checking his vitals with professional efficiency. How do you feel? Like I got shot 3 times. Accurate assessment. Her tone was dry, but he caught the relief underneath it. You're lucky. Another inch to the left on that abdominal wound and you'd have bled out before the paramedics arrived. Lucky. Lucien tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. That's one word for it. Amara sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. What happened, Lucien? And don't give me the sanitized version. I want the truth. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he started talking. I have enemies, he said slowly. People who want what I've built. What my family controls, shipping routes, import licenses, territories. He paused, his jaw tightening. Most of them are smart enough to negotiate, to find compromises. But there's a new player in the city. Victor Molina. He doesn't believe in compromise. So he tried to kill you. He tried to send a message. Lucien's eyes were hard despite the pain medication. That he's not afraid of me. That he's willing to escalate. That if I don't give him what he wants, he'll take it. Amara was silent, processing. And what does he want? Everything. Lucien's voice was bitter. My shipping contracts, my security networks, access to the Port Authority. He wants to turn this city into his personal empire, and I'm standing in his way. So what happens now? Now I recover, and then I handle him. The way he said handle made Amara's stomach twist. You mean kill him? Lucien didn't answer. Amara stood abruptly, pacing to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. This is what I was afraid of, she said quietly. This violence, this constant danger, this world where people get shot over business deals and nobody blinks. I know. Do you? She turned to face him, her voice rising slightly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trapped in a cycle you can't escape. And anyone who gets close to you gets dragged into it too. That's why I stayed away. His voice was rough. Like you asked, because I knew, I've always known, that my life isn't safe for people like you. People who are good, who save lives instead of taking them. Then why did you ask for me? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why specifically request me when you could have had any surgeon in this hospital? Lucien met her eyes. Because if I was going to die, he said quietly, I wanted your face to be the last thing I saw. The words hit her like a physical blow. Amara turned back to the window, her throat tight, her chest aching with something she didn't want to name. "You can't say things like that to me," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because it makes it harder to walk away." Silence stretched between them. Then Lucien said, "So don't." Amara closed her eyes. "It's not that simple." "It is." His voice was firm despite the weakness. "You either want this, want me, or you don't. Everything else is just fear. Fear keeps me alive. Fear keeps you alone." The words landed like a diagnosis. Amara stood frozen by the window, her reflection staring back at her in the glass, and realized he was right. She'd spent years building walls to protect herself from being hurt again, years convincing herself that being alone was safer than being vulnerable, that control was better than connection. And it had worked, until Lucien Kael walked into her life and made her want something more. Before she could respond, the door opened. A woman in her 60s entered, elegant, composed, moving with the kind of authority that suggested she was used to commanding rooms. Elara Kael, Lucien's grandmother. Her eyes swept over Lucien in the hospital bed, then landed on Amara. "Dr. Vale." Her voice was cool, but not unkind. "I understand you saved my grandson's life." "I did my job." "Your job?" Alara's mouth curved slightly. "Most surgeons wouldn't have operated on someone they're emotionally involved with. Too much risk, too much liability. But you did anyway." Amara's spine straightened. "I was the best surgeon available." "Yes, you were." Alara moved closer, studying Amara like she was evaluating a business acquisition. "Which is why you're exactly the kind of woman my family needs." "I'm not interested in being part of your family." "Not yet." Alara's smile was knowing. "But you will be. Because my grandson has chosen you. And when a Kael chooses someone, they don't let go easily." She turned to Lucien. "We need to talk. Privately." Amara took the dismissal for what it was. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door, but Alara's voice stopped her. "Dr. Vale?" Amara looked back. "Thank you," Alara said quietly, "for giving me more time with him." Amara nodded once and left. Nichts. She went home, showered, and tried to sleep. Failed. Her mind kept replaying the surgery, Lucien's blood on her hands, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to life. "If I was going to die, I wanted your face to be the last thing I saw." She rolled over, burying her face in her pillow, and finally let herself admit the truth. She was in love with him, completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably, and she had no idea what to do about it. 10. 3 days later, Lucien was transferred out of ICU to a private recovery room. Amara checked on him during her rounds, keeping things professional, maintaining distance. But every time she walked into his room, the air between them felt heavier. On the 4th day, Helena cornered her in the hallway. "You need to make a decision," Helena said bluntly. "About what?" "About Lucien Kael. About whether you're going to keep torturing yourself by pretending you don't care about him, or whether you're actually going to do something about it." Amara sighed. "It's complicated. It's only complicated because you're making it complicated." Helena's expression softened. "Look, I know you're scared. I know your last relationship left you feeling used and empty. But Lucien Kael is not that man. He's dangerous, yes. His world is violent, yes. But he's also loyal to the point of self-destruction. And he looks at you like you hung the moon. That's the problem." Amara's voice was quiet. "I don't want to be someone's moon. I don't want to be put on a pedestal and worshipped. I just want—" She stopped, searching for words. "I just want to be seen. As I am. Flaws and exhaustion, and all the messy, complicated parts I usually hide." "And you think he doesn't see that?" Amara was silent. Helena squeezed her shoulder. "Talk to him," she said gently. "Really talk to him. Before you make a decision you'll regret." Ishimahan. That night, Amara went to Lucien's room after her shift ended. He was awake, sitting up slightly, reading something on his phone. He looked better, color returning to his face, the pain lines around his eyes less severe. He looked up when she entered. "Hey." "Hey." Amara closed the door behind her, suddenly nervous. How are you feeling? Better. He set his phone aside. Thanks to you. She moved closer, perching on the edge of the chair beside his bed. I need to ask you something, she said quietly, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay? Why me? Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly. You could have anyone, women who understand your world, who are comfortable with the violence and the danger and the power games. Why choose someone like me? Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because you're the first person in years who looked at me and didn't see a weapon, didn't see someone to use or fear or manipulate. You just saw... He stopped, searching for words. You saw me, the man underneath all the rest of it, and you weren't impressed. Amara felt something crack open in her chest. I was impressed, she admitted softly. Terrified, but impressed. I know. His eyes held hers. That's what made it real. You didn't want anything from me except honesty, and I haven't had that in... His voice roughened. I can't remember the last time I had that. Amara reached out slowly, taking his hand. I'm scared, she whispered, of your world, of the violence, of losing myself trying to fit into a life I never asked for. Then don't fit. Lucien's grip tightened. Don't change. Don't become someone you're not. Just... He paused. Just let me love you as you are, and I'll handle the rest. The word love hung between them like a promise. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. You operated on me while I was bleeding out on your table. His voice was gentle. You're stronger than you think. She laughed, a wet, broken sound. That's different. That's medicine. I know how to do that. So learn this too. He pulled her closer until their foreheads nearly touched. We'll figure it out together. Amar closed her eyes, breathing him in, antiseptic and pain medication, and something underneath that was just him. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay. Then she kissed him, soft, careful, mindful of his injuries. Lucien's hand came up to cup her face, gentle and reverent, and kissed her back like she was something precious he'd been afraid to break. When they finally pulled apart, Amara was crying. I'm terrified, she admitted. Me too. Really? Really? He brushed a tear from her cheek. Because for the first time in my life, I have something to lose that actually matters. Rats. For 3 days, things were almost perfect. Lucien recovered quickly. Amara visited him between surgeries. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Her childhood in a small town 2 states away, his complicated relationship with his family, the weight of carrying legacies neither of them had asked for. She learned he played piano, that he'd wanted to be an architect before his father died and left him the empire, that he hated mushrooms and loved thunderstorms and read poetry when he couldn't sleep. He learned she was terrified of deep water, that she'd almost quit medical school twice, that she sang off key in the shower and cried at sad movies, and kept a list of every patient she'd lost in a locked drawer she never opened. They were learning each other, building something real, and then everything fell apart. It started with a phone call. Amara was reviewing post-op notes in the doctor's lounge when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Dr. Vale? The voice was male, unfamiliar, cold. My name is Detective Marcus Gray. I need you to come down to the precinct. We have some questions about Lucien Kael. Her stomach dropped. What kind of questions? The kind better discussed in person. His tone left no room for argument. Can you be here in an hour? Yes, but I don't understand. You will. The line went dead. Amara stared at her phone, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. She called Lucien immediately. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. She grabbed her coat and headed for his room, but when she got there, the bed was empty. Stripped. A nurse she didn't recognize was restocking supplies. Where's Mr. Kael? Amara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Discharged this morning? The nurse didn't look up. Against medical advice, actually. His lawyer came and signed him out. His lawyer? Yeah. Said something about urgent business. He left about 2 hours ago. Amara felt cold dread settling into her bones. She called him again. Voicemail. Then she called the number the detective had given her and told them she was on her way. The police station was exactly what she expected. Fluorescent lights, scuffed linoleum floors, the smell of bad coffee, and institutional despair. Detective Gray met her in the lobby. Mid-40s, graying hair, eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. Dr. Vale, thank you for coming. He gestured toward a hallway. This way. He led her to a small interrogation room, concrete walls, metal table, 2 chairs bolted to the floor. Amara's medical training kicked in immediately, recognizing the setup for what it was. This wasn't a friendly conversation. This was an interrogation. Am I under arrest? She asked carefully. No. Gray sat across from her, pulling out a file folder. But I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Lucien Kael. What kind of questions? Gray opened the folder, spreading photographs across the table. Crime scene photos. Bodies. Blood. Amara's stomach turned. Do you recognize these men? Gray asked quietly. She forced herself to look. 4 men. All dead. All shot multiple times. No, she whispered. These are the men who ambushed Lucien Kael 8 days ago. The men who shot him 3 times and left him bleeding in an alley. Gray's voice was flat, professional. Except, here's the interesting part. According to ballistics, they weren't killed by Lucien in self-defense. They were killed execution style, after they were already incapacitated. Amara's blood went cold. What are you saying? I'm saying someone went back after the initial confrontation and made sure none of them survived to talk. He leaned forward. And we have reason to believe that someone was Lucien Kael. That's impossible. He was in surgery. I operated on him for 6 hours. Not him personally. Gray pulled out another photograph. His people. His security team. We have witnesses placing Marcus Chen, Lucien's head of security, at the scene 30 minutes after the ambulance left, along with 3 other men, all armed. Amara stared at the photograph, her mind racing. Marcus Chen. The same man who'd called her after the parking garage attack. The same man who'd sent her security footage. This doesn't prove anything, she said carefully. Maybe not. Gray pulled out another document. But this might. It was a financial record, bank transfers, dates, amounts, and Amara's name. What is this? $200,000, Gray said quietly, deposited into an offshore account in your name 3 days after Lucien Kael was admitted to your hospital. Money we've traced back to one of his shell corporations. Amara felt like she'd been punched. I don't have an offshore account. You do now. Gray's eyes were hard. And it's going to be really difficult to convince a jury that you didn't know about it, that you didn't accept payment to make sure Lucien Kael survived his injuries, to falsify medical records if necessary, to cover up evidence of what really happened that night. This is insane. Amara's voice was shaking now. I would never. I'm a doctor. I took an oath. I'm sure you did. Gray gathered up the photographs. But here's what it looks like from our perspective. Lucien Kael was shot during a botched assassination attempt. His team went back and executed the witnesses. Then he paid you $200,000 to make sure he lived and to keep quiet about what you might have heard while he was under your care. I didn't hear anything, and I certainly didn't take money from him. Then how do you explain the account? I can't. Amar's hands were shaking, because I didn't know it existed until 30 seconds ago. Gray was quiet for a long moment, studying her. I want to believe you, Dr. Vale, he said finally. I really do. You seem like a good person caught up in something way over her head. But the evidence tells a different story. And unless you can give me something concrete, some proof that Lucien Kael set you up, some testimony about what he's really involved in, I'm going to have to assume you're complicit. Amara sat frozen, her mind spinning. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But the photographs were real. The financial records were real. And somewhere out there, Lucien Kael had disappeared the moment things got complicated. I need to make a phone call, she said quietly. You're not under arrest, Gray reminded her. You're free to leave any time. But if you walk out that door without cooperating, I can't protect you from what happens next. What happens next? Gray's expression was grim. Victor Molina, the man who ordered the hit on Lucien Kael, He knows about you now. Knows you saved Lucien's life. Knows you're connected to him. He paused. And in his world, that makes you a target. The words settled over Amara like ice water. So what are my options? Option 1. You cooperate with our investigation. Tell us everything you know about Lucien Kael's operations. Help us build a case against him. In exchange, we put you in protective custody until we can neutralize the threat. And option 2? You go home and hope Melina's people get to Lucien before they get to you. Amara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against concrete. I need to think. You have 24 hours, Gray said flatly. After that, we move forward with or without you. And Dr. Vale? She stopped at the door. Be very careful who you trust, because in my experience, men like Lucien Kael don't protect the people they claim to love. They use them. Amara drove home in a daze, her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Her phone had 17 missed calls, 3 from Helena, 4 from the hospital, 10 from unknown numbers, none from Lucien. She pulled into her building's garage and sat in the dark, engine off, trying to process what had just happened. An offshore account in her name, $200,000, 4 dead men, and Lucien, the man she'd finally allowed herself to care about, had disappeared without explanation the moment the police started asking questions. Her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. We need to talk. Come to the address below. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. Trust me. An address in the warehouse district. The kind of place people didn't go alone after dark if they had any sense of self-preservation. Amara stared at the message, her chest tight. Every instinct screamed at her to call the police, to call Helena, to do literally anything except drive to a deserted warehouse to meet someone who wouldn't even identify themselves. But she also knew, with the kind of certainty that lived in her bones, that if she wanted answers, this was her only chance to get them. She started the car and drove into the dark. Banti. The warehouse loomed against the night sky like something out of a nightmare. Broken windows, graffiti-stained walls, the smell of rust and abandonment heavy in the air. Amara parked under a broken streetlight and got out slowly, her phone clutched in her hand, her heart hammering so loud she could hear it in her ears. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was vast and empty, shadows pooling in corners, the only light coming from a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling 20 feet away. And beneath it stood Lucien. He looked different, harder. Dressed in black, a gun visible in a holster at his side, his expression cold and unreadable. Nothing like the man who'd kissed her in a hospital room 3 days ago. You came. His voice echoed in the empty space. You texted me. Amara's voice was steadier than she felt. What's going on, Lucien? The police think you executed 4 men. They have financial records showing you paid me off, and you discharged yourself from the hospital and disappeared without telling me. I know. That's it? You know? Her voice rose. I just spent 2 hours being interrogated by a detective who thinks I'm complicit in murder. So you need to start explaining, right now. Lucien stepped closer, his expression unreadable. I didn't set up that account, he said quietly, but I know who did. Who? Someone trying to frame both of us. Someone who wants me dead and you discredited so thoroughly that anything you say in my defense looks like a lie. Victor Molina. No. Lucien's jaw tightened. Someone closer. Amara felt her stomach drop. Who? Before he could answer, footsteps echoed from the shadows behind her. Amara spun. A figure emerged into the light. Lucien Kael. Lucien's grandmother stood there looking elegant and composed, a small pistol held loosely in one hand. Hello, Dr. Vale, she said pleasantly. I'm glad you could join us. We have so much to discuss. Amara looked between them, confusion and fear warring in her chest. I don't understand. Of course you don't. Alara's smile was cold. Because my grandson has been lying to you from the beginning. Grandmother, Lucien's voice was tight with warning. Oh, don't bother. Alara's eyes never left Amara. She deserves to know the truth before she makes her choice. What truth? Amara's voice came out smaller than she intended. Alara stepped closer, the gun still pointed casually at the ground. The truth is that everything you've experienced over the past 3 weeks, the Gala, the parking garage attack, the shooting, all of it was orchestrated. She paused, letting the words sink in. By me. The world tilted. Amara grabbed the wall for support, her mind refusing to process what she was hearing. What? I needed to test you, Alara said simply, to see if you were strong enough to survive in our world, smart enough to be useful, loyal enough to be trusted. So I set up scenarios to push you, to see how you'd react under pressure. The wine. Amara's voice was hollow. At the gala. That was you? Celine was always easy to manipulate. A few words about protecting family honor, and she was ready to humiliate you publicly. Alara's smile widened. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect you to pour wine back on her. That was delightful. Evelina, Amara whispered. The parking garage. Also me. Evelina was desperate to win Lucien back. It wasn't hard to convince her that you were the obstacle, that if she scared you away, he'd return to her. Alara paused. Of course, I didn't tell her you could fight. That was a pleasant surprise. Proved you were more than just a pretty face with a medical degree. Amara felt like she was going to be sick. And the shooting. Victor Molina is real, Alara admitted. His ambitions are real, but the ambush, the specific timing, the location, the fact that Lucien survived, that was all carefully controlled. We needed him injured enough to bring you fully into our world, to make you feel invested, to bind you to us emotionally before you understood what you were agreeing to. Amara turned to Lucien, searching his face desperately for denial, for shock, for anything that suggested he didn't know. But his expression was carefully blank. And that's when she knew. He'd known. He'd known everything. You used me. Her voice broke. All of it. The conversations, the honesty, the vulnerability. It was all manipulation. No. Lucien stepped forward, his composure finally cracking. Amara, you have to understand. Understand what? Tears were streaming down her face now. That you let your grandmother orchestrate attacks against me to test whether I was worthy of your family? That every moment between us was built on lies? Not lies. His voice was desperate now. The feelings were real, are real. Everything I told you about Evelina, about wanting someone who saw me, that was true. But you still used me. Silence. Lucien looked away, his jaw working. Yes, he said finally, quietly. I let it happen because I wanted you. And I convinced myself that if the end result was us together, the means didn't matter. The admission shattered something inside Amara. She looked at Alara, at the gun still held loosely in her hand, and realized with cold certainty that she was trapped. So what happens now? Her voice was hollow, empty. You've tested me, manipulated me, broken me. What do you want? Alara's expression softened slightly. I want you to join us, she said simply. Willingly, knowingly. I want you to understand that this family, this empire, requires strength and ruthlessness and the ability to make impossible choices. And I believe you have that in you. And if I say no, then the offshore account becomes public. The police investigation continues. And you spend the next decade trying to rebuild a career and a reputation that will never recover. Alara paused. Or Victor Molina's people find you, and you don't have to worry about your reputation anymore. Amara felt the trap close around her like steel jaws. She looked at Lucien, at the man she'd fallen in love with, and saw nothing but guilt and shame and desperate hope that she'd forgive him anyway. You said you wanted honesty, she whispered. You said you'd never lied to me. I didn't. His voice was rough. I just didn't tell you the whole truth. That's the same thing. He flinched like she'd struck him. Amara turned to Alara. I need time to think, to decide. You have until morning, Alara said flatly. After that, we move forward with or without you. And Dr. Vale? Amara looked back. Choose wisely, because this is the only offer you'll get. Accept it, and you have our protection, our resources, our loyalty. Refuse, and you're on your own against forces that will destroy you. Alara turned and walked back into the shadows, leaving Amara alone with Lucien under the bare bulb. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Lucien said quietly, I'm sorry. Amara laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo 3 weeks of manipulation. Sorry doesn't give me back the person I was before I met you. I know. His voice cracked. But I need you to understand. Everything I felt, everything I said, that was real. My grandmother orchestrated the situations, but my feelings, those were mine. Are mine. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? Lucien had no answer. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild temperature. I should go. Amara, don't! She held up a hand. Don't make this harder than it already is. Just... Her voice broke. Just let me leave. She walked toward the door, each step feeling like wading through concrete. Behind her, Lucien called out, his voice raw with desperation. I love you. Amara stopped, didn't turn around. I know, she whispered. That's what makes this so much worse. Then she walked out into the night, leaving Lucien standing alone in the empty warehouse with the echo of her footsteps fading into nothing. Amara drove without direction, her vision blurred by tears, her chest so tight she could barely breathe. Everything was a lie. Every moment, every conversation, every touch. All of it built on manipulation and control and tests she hadn't known she was taking. She pulled over on the side of the highway and finally let herself break, sobbing until her throat was raw and her body ached and there were no tears left. When she finally looked up, dawn was breaking across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and blood. And Amara realized she had a choice to make. She could walk away, try to rebuild her life, hope the police investigation died and Victor Molina's attention turned elsewhere, or she could step into the darkness willingly, accept Elara's offer, become part of a family that valued power over truth and control over love. Both options felt like dying, but only one guaranteed survival. Her phone buzzed, a text from Elara. Time's up. Choose. Amara stared at the message, her hands shaking, her heart hammering against her ribs, and made the only choice she could live with, even if it destroyed her. Amara sat in her car on the side of the highway watching the sun rise, her phone burning in her hand like a live coal. Time's up. Choose. Her finger hovered over the screen for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then she typed 3 words and hit send before she could change her mind. I'm coming in. The response came immediately. Smart girl. Kael Estate. 1 hour. Amara dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and started driving, not toward the estate, toward the one person who might actually help her without asking questions she couldn't answer. Bam. Helena opened her door at 6:47 in the morning, still in her bathrobe, coffee in hand, eyes widening when she saw Amara's face. What happened? Amara pushed past her into the apartment, pacing like a trapped animal. I need your help, and I need you to not ask questions until I'm done talking. Helena closed the door slowly, studying her. Okay. The story came out in fragments. Disjointed. Raw. The gala. The parking garage. The shooting. The interrogation. The warehouse. Elara's confession. Lucien's silence. When Amara finally stopped talking, Helena looked like she'd been punched. They orchestrated all of it, she said slowly. To test you. Yes. And now they want you to join them, willingly. Yes. Helena set her coffee down carefully, her hands shaking slightly. What are you going to do? I don't know. Amara sank onto the couch, exhausted. If I refuse, the police investigation destroys my career and Victor Molina kills me. If I accept, I become part of a family that treats human beings like chess pieces. There's no good option. So make a third option. Amara looked up sharply. What? Helena sat beside her, her expression intense. You're a surgeon, Amara. You know better than anyone that sometimes the only way to save a patient is to cut out the infection entirely, even if it means losing healthy tissue in the process. I don't understand. I think you do. Helena's voice was quiet. Careful. Lucien Kael orchestrated everything. She's the infection. Remove her, and maybe the rest of the family can actually heal. Amara stared at her, her blood going cold. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about surgery. Helena held her gaze. Precise. Necessary. The kind that saves lives by taking one. I took an oath. To do no harm. Helena's voice hardened. But sometimes harm is exactly what's required. Sometimes the only way to protect yourself and everyone else she'll manipulate in the future is to stop her permanently. Amara stood abruptly, her chest tight. I can't. I'm not a killer. Neither was I, until my sister was murdered by her husband and the police did nothing because he had money and connections. Helena's eyes were distant, haunted. I learned then that justice isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. When the system fails you, you become the system. The words hung between them like smoke. Amara opened her mouth to argue, to protest, to say this was insane, but she couldn't, because somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and exhaustion and heartbreak, a small voice whispered that Helena was right. Lucien Kael had destroyed her life as casually as someone rearranging furniture, and she'd do it again to the next woman who caught Lucien's attention, and the next, until someone stopped her. I wouldn't even know how, Amara said finally, her voice hollow. Helena stood, walked to her bedroom, and came back with a small leather case. She opened it. Inside was a syringe, a vial, clear liquid. Potassium chloride, Helena said quietly. Untraceable if administered correctly. Looks like cardiac arrest. By the time anyone thinks to check, it'll be metabolized. Amara stared at the vial, her heart hammering. Why do you have this? Because I learned a long time ago that sometimes you need insurance. Helena closed the case and held it out. Take it. Or don't. But if you're going to walk into that house today, at least give yourself options. Amara's hand trembled as she reached out. Her fingers closed around the leather case, and something inside her shifted. She wasn't the same woman who'd walked into that gala 3 weeks ago. That woman had believed the world was fair, that doing the right thing mattered, that good people were protected by virtue of their goodness. This woman knew better. Thank you, she whispered. Helena pulled her into a fierce hug. Be careful, she said quietly, and whatever you decide, make sure you can live with it after. Probs. The Kael estate sat on 20 acres outside the city, hidden behind iron gates and old money trees. The house itself was a monument to wealth that had forgotten how to be subtle. White columns, marble steps, windows that reflected the morning sun like cold eyes. Amara parked in the circular driveway and sat for a moment, the leather case tucked into her coat pocket, her pulse pounding in her ears. She could still turn around, drive away, take her chances with the police and Victor Molina and whatever fate had waiting for her. But she didn't. She got out of the car and walked toward the front door with the kind of calm that came from having nothing left to lose. A man in a suit opened the door before she could knock. Security, silent and efficient. He led her through hallways lined with portraits of dead Kaels, their painted eyes following her like accusations, until they reached a sitting room overlooking the gardens. Elara sat by the window in an elegant chair, morning light painting her silver hair gold. She looked like a queen holding court. Lucien stood near the fireplace, his expression unreadable. Elara smiled when Amara entered. Dr. Vale, I'm pleased you made the right choice. I wouldn't call it right. Amara's voice was steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. I'd call it survival. Semantics. Elara gestured to a chair. Sit. We have much to discuss. Amara sat, her hand brushing against the leather case in her pocket. Not yet. She needed to understand the full picture first. Before I agree to anything, Amara said carefully, I need to know what you actually want from me, not the vague promises about family and protection, specifics. Elara's smile widened, pleased. Smart. I knew you would be. She leaned forward slightly. What I want is simple. Lucien needs a partner who can operate in both worlds. The legitimate business world where reputation matters, and the darker territories where survival requires ruthlessness. You're a respected surgeon. You have access to hospitals, medical records, powerful people in vulnerable moments. That makes you invaluable. Amara's stomach turned. You want me to be a spy? I want you to be useful. Elara's voice was cool. In exchange, you get protection from Victor Molina. The offshore account disappears, the police investigation goes away, and you become part of one of the most powerful families in this city. And if I refuse to cooperate after I've accepted, then you become a liability. Elara's eyes were cold. And we handle liabilities permanently. The threat was clear. Amara glanced at Lucien, who stood silent and still, his jaw tight with something that might have been shame. "Does he get a say in this?" she asked quietly. "No," Alara said flatly. Lucien forfeited his voice when he allowed his emotions to compromise his judgment. This is a business decision now, not a romantic one. Amara felt something crack inside her chest. She looked at Lucien, really looked at him, and saw a man trapped in a cage he'd been born into. A man who'd tried to love her while drowning in obligations and expectations, and a grandmother who treated people like assets to be acquired. For a moment, she almost pitied him. Then she remembered every lie, every manipulation, every test she'd been forced through without consent, and the pity turned to something harder. "I accept," she said quietly. Alara's expression lit with triumph. "Excellent. We'll draw up the papers this afternoon. Make it official. Welcome to the family, Dr. Vale." She stood, smoothing her skirt, and walked toward the door. "Lucien will show you to your new accommodations. We've prepared a suite for you here at the estate until we're certain Victor's threat has been neutralized." She paused at the threshold. "Oh, and Dr. Vale, don't try to leave. The estate is secure, for your protection, of course." Translation: prison. Alara left. The silence she left behind felt heavy enough to suffocate under. Amara stood slowly, her hand still in her pocket, fingers brushing the leather case. Lucien finally moved, stepping closer, but not close enough to touch. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Stop saying that." Her voice was flat, empty. "Sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't undo what she did, what you let her do." "I know." His voice cracked. "But I need you to understand. I never wanted this, any of it. I wanted—" He stopped, searching for words. "I wanted you. Just you. Without the manipulation and the tests and all of it. But my grandmother doesn't understand that. She only understands power and control and making sure everyone around her serves a purpose." "And what's my purpose now?" Amara's eyes were hard. "Besides being your family's newest asset? You're not an asset." Lucien stepped closer, desperate. You're the only real thing I've had in years, the only person who made me feel like maybe I could be something other than what she raised me to be." "But you're not, are you?" The words came out cold, brutal. "You're exactly what she made you, a man who uses people and calls it love." Lucien flinched like she'd struck him. "That's not fair." "Fair," Amara laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You want to talk about fair? Your grandmother orchestrated attacks against me, put a knife to my throat, nearly got me arrested, and you stood by and let it happen because you wanted me badly enough to justify the means. So don't talk to me about fair." Lucien's composure finally shattered. "What was I supposed to do?" His voice rose. "She's my grandmother, my family. She controls everything I have, everything I am. If I'd opposed her, she would have destroyed you anyway and cut me off completely. At least this way I can protect you." "Protect me?" Amara stepped closer, fury burning through her exhaustion. "Is that what you call this? Locking me in your house? Forcing me to work for your family? That's not protection, Lucien, that's ownership." "I love you." The words came out desperate, raw. "I don't care," Amara's voice broke. "I don't care if you love me or hate me or feel nothing at all. Because whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, it died the moment I learned the truth." She moved toward the door. Lucien caught her wrist. "Please, don't give up on us." "Not yet." Amara looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. "Let go." "Amara, let go." He did. She walked out without looking back. The suite they'd prepared for her was beautiful, elegant, decorated in soft creams and golds with a view of the gardens and a bathroom larger than her apartment. It felt like a gilded cage. Amara locked the door, pulled out her phone, and tried to call Helena. No signal. They were jamming it. Of course they were. She pulled the leather case from her pocket and stared at the vial inside. Potassium chloride. Quick. Painless. Untraceable. All she'd have to do was wait for the right moment. A private conversation. Alara's afternoon tea. One injection and the woman who'd orchestrated her destruction would be gone. Simple. Clean. Murder. Amara set the case on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She was a surgeon. She saved lives. She didn't take them. But Helena's words echoed in her head. Sometimes the only way to save a patient is to cut out the infection entirely. Was Lucien Kael an infection? Or was Amara just looking for an excuse to become the kind of person who could kill in cold blood? She didn't know anymore. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. "Dr. Vale?" A woman's voice. Young, nervous. "Mrs. Kael requests your presence for lunch in 30 minutes. Amara stood, smoothing her clothes, forcing herself back into the mask of composure she'd worn for years. "I'll be there." Lunch was served in a glass-walled conservatory filled with orchids and filtered sunlight. Alara sat at the head of the table, looking regal and satisfied. Lucien sat to her right, his expression carefully blank. Amara took the seat across from him. The meal was elegant, French, multi-course, the kind of food that cost more than most people's weekly salary. Amara could barely taste it. "You're quiet, Dr. Vale," Alara observed, sipping white wine. "Second thoughts already?" "No." Amara's voice was steady. "Just processing." "Good. Processing means you're thinking strategically. That's important in this family." Alara set her glass down. "Now, let's discuss your first assignment." Amara's stomach tightened. "Already?" "No reason to wait." Alara pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Victor Molina's daughter, 16 years old, chronic kidney disease. She's on the transplant list at Crescent General. I want you to make sure she doesn't get a kidney." The words landed like stones. Amara stared at the folder without opening it. "You want me to let a 16-year-old girl die? I want you to prioritize other patients." Alara's voice was calm, clinical. "Victor's daughter dies. He's distracted, vulnerable. Easier to negotiate with or eliminate entirely. It's strategic. It's murder. It's war." Alara leaned forward. "And in war, casualties are inevitable. The question is whether you have the stomach for it." Amara looked at Lucien. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. "Then we find someone else to do it, and you become unnecessary." Alara's smile was thin. "I don't keep unnecessary things, Dr. Vale. They take up too much space." Amara felt the trap close around her completely. She could refuse, hold on to her principles, die with her integrity intact. Or she could survive, become complicit, turn into exactly the kind of person she'd spent her entire life trying not to be. She picked up the folder, opened it. A photograph stared back at her. A young girl with dark eyes and a tired smile. Sophia Molina, 16, waiting for a transplant that might save her life. And Amara was supposed to make sure it never came. "I need time," she said finally. "You have 48 hours. Alara stood. "After that, I'll assume you've made your choice." She left. Lucien finally looked up. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. Amara laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Yes, I do, because if I don't, your grandmother kills me. And if I do, I become a murderer. So either way, the woman I was dies today." She stood, the folder clutched in her hand. "Congratulations, Lucien. You got what you wanted. I'm part of your family now. I hope it was worth it." She walked out, leaving him sitting alone at the table, surrounded by the ruins of a meal neither of them had finished. Amara spent the next 6 hours locked in her suite, staring at Sophia Molina's file. 16 years old. Straight-A student, played violin, loved astronomy, wanted to be a doctor someday. Just a kid whose only crime was being born to the wrong father. Amara's hands trembled as she set the file down. She couldn't do this. She wouldn't. But if she refused, Alara would kill her and find someone else to sabotage Sophia's treatment anyway. So the girl would die regardless. Unless. An idea formed slowly, carefully. Dangerous, but possible. Amara pulled out the leather case Helena had given her and stared at the vial one more time. Then she made her choice. Dinner that night was tense. Alara presided over the table like a general reviewing troops. Lucien sat silent and miserable. Amara picked at her food and waited. At 8:30, Alara announced she was retiring to her private study. Amara excused herself 10 minutes later. She moved through the hallways of the estate with the confidence of someone who belonged there, avoiding security cameras she'd noted earlier, following the route she'd memorized from blueprints she'd found in the library that afternoon. Alara's study was on the second floor. Private. Locked. Amara pulled a hairpin from her pocket, a skill she'd learned from a patient years ago who'd been a former locksmith, and worked the mechanism until it clicked open. Inside, the study was exactly what she expected. Dark wood, expensive art, a desk covered in documents that probably held enough evidence to destroy half the city's elite. Alara sat in a leather chair by the window, a brandy in one hand, her back to the door. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said without turning around. Amara froze. Alara turned slowly, her expression amused. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this? That I wouldn't have cameras in the hallways? That I wouldn't see you picking the lock?" She stood, setting her brandy down. "You're predictable, Dr. Vale. Just like every other person who thinks they're smarter than me." Amara's hand moved to her pocket. To the syringe. Alara noticed. "Go ahead," she said calmly. "Try it. See how fast security gets here. See how quickly your noble attempt at justice turns into just another murder I have to clean up." Amara's hand shook. "You destroyed my life." "I gave your life purpose." Alara stepped closer. "Before me, you were just another surgeon working herself to death for patients who'd forget you the moment they left your care. Now you're a part of something bigger, something that matters." "You call this mattering?" Amar's voice rose. "Killing children? Manipulating people? Building an empire on corpses?" "I call it survival." Alara's eyes were hard. "And if you're too weak to understand that, then you're exactly as useless as I feared." She reached for something on her desk. A phone. Amara moved without thinking. Years of training took over. She closed the distance, grabbed Alara's wrist, twisted it hard enough to make the older woman gasp. The phone clattered to the floor. They stood frozen for 3 seconds, Amara's hand still locked around Alara's wrist, both of them breathing hard. "You can't kill me," Alara said quietly. "You don't have it in you." "You're right," Amara whispered. Then she injected the entire vial of potassium chloride into Alara's neck. Alara's eyes went wide with shock. She stumbled backward, hand flying to her throat, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Amara caught her as she fell, lowering her gently to the floor. "I can't kill you," Amara said quietly, watching Alara's pupils dilate. "But I can stop you from killing anyone else." Alara's body convulsed once, twice, then went still. Amara knelt beside her for a long moment, her hands covered in the woman's blood where the needle had torn skin, her chest heaving with something between horror and relief. She'd just committed murder. Premeditated? Calculated? The kind that sent people to prison for life. But she'd also stopped a monster. The door burst open. Lucien stood in the doorway, his face white with shock. Behind him, security filled the hallway. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Lucien looked at Amara kneeling beside his grandmother's body and said one word. "Run." Amara didn't hesitate. She ran. Amara ran. Through hallways lined with portraits of dead Kaels whose painted eyes couldn't judge her anymore. Past security guards shouting behind her. Down staircases her legs barely remembered navigating. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs open. Behind her, Lucien's voice cut through the chaos. "Let her go." Footsteps stopped. Confused voices overlapped. "Sir, she just... Yist." "I said let her go." Lucien's voice was steel. Command. The voice of a man who'd spent his entire life being obeyed. "Now." Amara didn't stop to process it. She hit the front door at full speed, burst into the night air, and kept running toward her car. Keys. Where were her keys? Her hand shook as she dug through her pockets, fingers finally closing around cold metal. She yanked the car door open, threw herself inside, jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. She floored it. Gravel exploded beneath her tires as she tore down the long driveway toward the iron gates. They were closed, locked, but she didn't slow down. The car hit the gates at 40 miles per hour. Metal screamed, glass shattered. The airbag exploded against her chest like a fist, but the gates gave way. Amara fought through the deflating airbag, her face bleeding where something had cut her cheek, and kept driving with a crumpled hood and one headlight flickering like a dying heartbeat. She didn't look back, couldn't look back, because if she did, she'd see what she'd left behind. Lucien Kael's body on the floor of that study, cold, still, dead by Amara's hand. The realization hit her 3 miles down the highway. She'd killed someone, not in self-defense, not in the heat of passion, but with calculated precision, with medical knowledge turned weapon. She'd become exactly what she'd sworn never to be. Amara pulled over onto the shoulder, threw open the door, and vomited until there was nothing left. Humped. She drove to the only place that felt even remotely safe, Helena's apartment. It was nearly midnight when she knocked. Helena opened the door in pajamas, took one look at Amara's face, and pulled her inside without a word. Amara collapsed onto the couch. Helena disappeared into the kitchen and came back with water and a first aid kit. She cleaned the cut on Amara's cheek in silence, her movements gentle and efficient. "Did you do it?" Helena asked finally. Amara nodded. "Good." "Good?" Amara's voice cracked. "I murdered someone, Helena. I'm a doctor. I took an oath." "You survived." Helena's voice was firm. "That woman was going to destroy you, kill you, or worse, turn you into something unrecognizable. You did what you had to do." "That doesn't make it right." "No." Helena sat back, studying her. "But it makes it necessary, and sometimes that's all we get." Amara pressed her hands against her face, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. "What do I do now?" "You rest. Then we figure out the next move." "There is no next move. I killed a woman from one of the most powerful families in the city. They'll find me. They'll—" Her phone buzzed. "Lucien." Amara stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. Helena reached over and answered it on speaker before Amara could stop her. "Dr. Vale's phone." Lucien's voice came through tight with something that might have been panic. "Where is she? Is she safe?" "That depends on what you plan to do about what happened tonight." Silence on the other end. Then Lucien said quietly, "My grandmother suffered a cardiac event. Sudden. Tragic. The family doctor has already signed the death certificate. There will be no autopsy, no investigation, no police." Amara's breath caught. "Why?" she whispered, leaning closer to the phone. "Because you were right." Lucien's voice was raw, broken. "About all of it. She was a monster. She destroyed people for sport, and I let her because I was too weak to stop her." He paused. "But you did. You stopped her. And I'm not going to punish you for having the courage I never had." Amara felt tears sliding down her face. "Lucien, I released the evidence," he continued. "Everything. The offshore account linking you to our family, the financial records, the security footage from the parking garage, all of it sent to Detective Gray with an anonymous tip implicating my grandmother in a conspiracy to frame you." His voice steadied slightly. "By morning, you'll be cleared of everything. The investigation will close, and you'll be free." "Free," Amara repeated hollowly. "Yes. And what about you?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. Dismantle everything she built. The corruption, the violence, the empire built on broken people." He exhaled slowly. "It won't be fast. And it won't be clean. But maybe I can turn this family into something that doesn't destroy everything it touches." "You can't do that alone." "I know." His voice softened. "But I lost the right to ask for your help the moment I let her manipulate you. So I'm not asking. I'm just—" He stopped. "I'm just telling you that I'm sorry. For all of it. And that I hope someday you can forgive me." The line went dead. Amara sat frozen, the phone still in her hand, her chest so tight she could barely breathe. Helena gently took the phone and set it aside. "He's giving you an out," she said quietly, "covering for you, protecting you, even though you killed his grandmother." "I know. That's not nothing." "I know that too." Amara's voice broke. "But it doesn't change what I did, who I became." Helena pulled her into a hug, and Amara finally let herself cry, deep, wrenching sobs that tore through her chest like something breaking open. When she was empty, Helena said quietly, "You're not a monster, Amara. You're a woman who did what she had to do to survive, and now you get to decide who you become next." 3 days passed in careful silence. Amara stayed at Helena's apartment, sleeping fitfully, eating when Helena forced her to, watching the news coverage of Lucien Kael's sudden death with numb detachment. The stories were all the same: tragic, unexpected. A pillar of the community lost too soon. Nobody mentioned murder. Nobody suspected. On the fourth day, Detective Gray called. Amara's stomach dropped when she saw his name on the screen. Helena nodded encouragement. Amara answered. Dr. Vale. Gray's voice was professional, but not unkind. I wanted to update you on the investigation. We received new evidence that conclusively proves the offshore account and financial transfers were orchestrated by Lucien Kael without your knowledge or consent. You've been cleared of all suspicion. Amara's hand trembled. Cleared? Yes. I apologize for the interrogation. We were following the evidence we had at the time, but it's clear now that you were a victim of a larger conspiracy. He paused. You're free to return to your life, Dr. Vale. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for what you went through. The line went dead. Amara set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. It's over, Helena said quietly. No. Amara's voice was flat. It's just beginning. She went back to work a week later. Walking into Crescent General felt like stepping into a past life. Everything looked the same: the fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, the controlled chaos of the ER, but Amara felt fundamentally changed. She moved through her rounds mechanically, checking vitals, reviewing charts, talking to patients with the same professional warmth she'd always managed. But inside she felt hollow. Dr. Chen found her in the break room on her third day back. Welcome back, he said carefully. How are you holding up? Fine. The lie came automatically. Chen studied her for a moment, then sat down across from her. I heard about what happened. With the Kael family, the investigation. His voice was gentle. That's not something you just bounce back from. I'm managing. Are you? Amara looked up sharply. Chen held her gaze, his expression open, concerned. I've been doing this job for 20 years, he said quietly. I've seen what trauma does to surgeons, how it changes the way we see our work, our patients, ourselves. He leaned forward slightly. If you need to talk to someone, a therapist, a colleague, anyone, you need to do it before the weight of what you're carrying crushes you. Amara's throat tightened. I killed someone, she whispered before she could stop herself. Chen didn't flinch. In self-defense? Does it matter? Yes. His voice was firm. It matters a great deal, because killing to survive is different than killing for power. And from everything I've heard, you survived something most people wouldn't have. Amara looked away, tears burning her eyes. I don't feel like a survivor. I feel like a murderer. Then let me tell you what I see. Chen's voice was steady, certain. I see a woman who saved my patient's life when he should have died on that table, who stayed calm under pressure, who fought for someone even when she had every reason to walk away. That's not a murderer, Dr. Vale. That's a healer who got caught in an impossible situation and did what she had to do. The words cracked something open inside Amar's chest. I don't know how to live with this, one day at a time. Chen stood, squeezing her shoulder gently. One surgery, one patient, one moment of choosing to keep going even when it feels impossible. That's how you survive. He left. Amara sat alone in the break room, Chen's words echoing in her head, and realized he was right. She had a choice. She could let what happened destroy her. Or she could choose to keep going, to keep saving lives, to turn the darkness of what she'd done into fuel for something better. It wouldn't erase the guilt, but it might make it bearable. What? 2 weeks later, Amara was reviewing transplant lists when a name caught her eye. Sophia Molina, 16 years old, chronic kidney disease. The girl Ilara had wanted her to kill. Amara stared at the file for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone and called the transplant coordinator. I want to fast-track Sophia Molina for the next available kidney. Bump her to the top of the list. Dr. Vale, her priority score doesn't justify. I'm authorizing it, on my recommendation. She's young, otherwise healthy, and has been waiting long enough. Amar's voice was firm. Get it done. She hung up before the coordinator could argue. 3 days later, Sophia Molina received a kidney transplant. The surgery went perfectly. Amara watched from the observation deck as another surgeon closed, her chest tight, with something that felt almost like redemption. She couldn't bring Alara back, couldn't undo what she'd done, but she could save the girl Alara had wanted dead. And maybe, that was enough for today. A month after Alara's death, Amara received a package at her apartment. No return address, just her name in handwriting she recognized, Lucien's. Inside was a single envelope and a small velvet box. Amara opened the envelope first. Amara, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you if you threw this away without reading it. But I needed you to know what I've done, what I'm doing. I've spent the last month dismantling my grandmother's empire piece by piece, shutting down the illegal operations, returning stolen assets, turning evidence over to authorities for crimes I can actually prosecute without destroying innocent people caught in the crossfire. It's slow work and ugly, but necessary. I've also established a foundation in your name, the Amara Vale Trauma Center Initiative. It's funded entirely by liquidated Kael assets, and it's dedicated to building medical facilities in underserved communities, starting with the neighborhood where I was shot. You don't have to be involved. You don't have to accept it. But I wanted you to know that everything you went through, everything I put you through, it's going to mean something. It's going to save lives. Because that's what you do. That's who you are. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm asking you to keep being the person who reminded me that goodness exists, that people can choose to be better than what they were raised to be. You saved my life twice, Amara. Once on that operating table, and once by showing me that love doesn't have to be manipulation, that caring about someone means setting them free even when it destroys you. I love you. I'll always love you. But I'm letting you go. Be extraordinary. Lucien Amara's hand shook as she set the letter down and opened the velvet box. Inside was a ring, not an engagement ring, a simple silver band engraved with words in Latin, per aspera ad astra, through hardships to the stars. Amara slipped it onto her finger, not her ring finger, but her right hand, and sat in the quiet of her apartment feeling something shift inside her chest. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was acknowledgement that Lucien was trying, that he was choosing to be better, that the man she'd fallen in love with had been real beneath all the lies and manipulation, and that was enough to let her start healing. 6 months passed. Amara threw herself into work with renewed purpose. She took on the most difficult cases, mentored younger surgeons, started teaching trauma protocols at the medical school. She also started therapy. Twice a week, she sat in a quiet office and talked about Alara, about the murder, about the guilt that still woke her up at 3 a.m. with her heart racing and her hands shaking. Her therapist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no tolerance for self-pity, helped her understand something crucial. She'd been a victim long before she became a killer. Alara had stripped away her autonomy, her safety, her ability to trust her own judgment. And in that moment in the study, faced with a woman who would have destroyed her and countless others, Amara had reclaimed her power the only way she'd known how. It didn't make it right, but it made it human. And slowly, painfully slowly, Amara learned to forgive herself, not for what she'd done, but for surviving it. Dates. The Amara Vale Trauma Center opened 9 months after Alara's death. It was a beautiful facility in a neighborhood that had been forgotten by most of the city's elite. State-of-the-art equipment, multilingual staff, trauma bays designed by someone who actually understood what emergency medicine required. Amara stood at the opening ceremony in a simple black dress, watching community members tour the facility with tears in their eyes, and felt something close to peace. This was her legacy now, not the woman who'd killed to survive, but the woman who'd turned that darkness into light. Helena stood beside her, arms crossed, smiling. You did good, kid. We did good, Amara corrected. I couldn't have survived without you. No. Helena's voice was firm. You survived because you're stronger than you think. I just reminded you of that. Across the crowd, Amara caught sight of a familiar figure. Lucien stood near the back, dressed in a simple suit, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met. He nodded once. A question. Permission to approach. Amara hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then she nodded back. Lucien moved through the crowd carefully, stopping a respectful distance away. Hi, he said quietly. Hi. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Lucien said, "The center is beautiful. You should be proud. It's yours. Your money, your penance." "No." His voice was soft but certain. "It's yours. Your vision, your heart. I just provided resources. You provided purpose." Amara studied his face, looking for the manipulation, the hidden agenda, but all she saw was exhaustion and something that looked like hard-won peace. "How's the dismantling going?" she asked. Slowly, painfully. He smiled faintly. "Turns out rebuilding an empire into something ethical is harder than running it criminally. Who knew?" Despite herself, Amara felt her mouth twitch. "Are you okay?" she asked. The question clearly surprised him. He stopped, considering. "I'm better than I was. Working on being better than I am. It's a process." "Yeah." Amara's voice was quiet. "It is." They stood in silence again, but this time it felt less heavy. "I read your letter," Amara said finally. "All of it. And I'm not ready to forgive you yet." Her voice was steady, honest. "Maybe I never will be, but I'm also not carrying hate anymore, just—" She searched for words. "Just acceptance. That what happened, happened, and that we both have to live with it." Lucien nodded slowly, his eyes bright with something that might have been relief. "That's more than I deserve." "Probably." Amara looked away, watching families explore the trauma center. "But it's what I can give right now, so take it or leave it." "I'll take it." His voice was rough, grateful. "Thank you." He started to leave. "Lucien?" He stopped. Amara pulled the silver ring from her pocket. She'd taken it off before the ceremony, unsure if wearing it sent the wrong message, and held it up. "The inscription," she said, "Per aspera ad astra, through hardships to the stars." "Yeah." "Do you believe that? That suffering leads to something better?" Lucien turned back, his expression thoughtful. "I believe we get to choose what our suffering becomes," he said quietly. "It can break us, or it can forge us into something stronger, something capable of extraordinary things." He paused. "You chose extraordinary, Amara. You always have." Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Amara standing alone with the ring in her hand and tears sliding quietly down her face. Not sad tears, not happy tears. Just tears. The kind that came when something heavy finally lifted. Mots. That night, Amara stood on the roof of her apartment building, looking out at the city lights glittering like fallen stars. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, the one who'd walked into that gala in an ivory dress, planning to stay for an hour and leave before anyone noticed. That woman had believed the world was fair, that good people were protected, that doing the right thing mattered. This woman knew better, knew the world was violent and complicated and merciless to people who tried to stay good while drowning in darkness. But she also knew something that woman hadn't, that survival wasn't about staying clean. It was about choosing what you'd become after the dirt washed off. Amara slipped the silver ring back onto her finger, not as a promise to Lucien, but as a reminder to herself, that she'd been through hell and come out breathing, that she'd killed and somehow found a way to keep healing, that she was flawed and broken and carrying scars that would never fully disappear. But she was still here, still fighting, still choosing to save lives even when her own felt unsalvageable. Her phone buzzed, a text from the hospital. Trauma incoming, multiple casualties, all hands needed. Amara looked at the message, then back at the city spread out beneath her like a promise. She could ignore it, clock out, let someone else handle the bleeding and broken bodies coming through those doors. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She'd walked through fire and learned the only way to survive burning was to carry the heat inside you and use it to light the way for others. So she grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Not because she was a hero, not because she'd earned redemption, but because trauma surgeon was still her name and saving lives was still her purpose. And somewhere in that hospital, people were dying who didn't have to. And she'd be damned if she let them go without a fight. Chets. 5 years later, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in early spring, Amara stood in Trauma Bay 3 looking down at a patient who'd just coded on the table. 22 years old, gunshot wound to the chest. She'd fought for him for an hour, chest compressions, defibrillation, medication she could recite in her sleep. But sometimes fighting wasn't enough. Sometimes death won anyway. The monitors flatlined. "Time of death, 1437, she said quietly. Her team stepped back, exhausted and hollow-eyed, the familiar weight of failure settling over the room like fog. Amara stripped off her gloves, her gown, and walked to the scrub sink. In the reflection of the metal paper towel dispenser, she caught sight of her own face. Older now, lines around her eyes from too many late nights, gray threading through her dark hair despite only being 33. But her eyes were steady, clear. She'd lost patients before. Would lose them again. That was the cost of this work. But she'd also saved hundreds, mentored dozens of young surgeons, built trauma centers in 3 cities, turned Lucien's blood money into actual good in the world, and she'd learned to sleep at night despite the ghost of Lucien Kael that still visited her nightmares sometimes. Not forgiveness, but coexistence. She dried her hands and headed back toward the ER, where another patient was already waiting, because that's what she did. She kept going. One surgery at a time, one life at a time, one breath at a time, through hardships to the stars. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Focal. The end. Some people are born into darkness and spend their lives searching for light. Others walk into darkness by accident and have to claw their way back out. Amara Vale did both. She learned that love could be a weapon, that survival sometimes required becoming what you feared, and that redemption wasn't about erasing your sins. It was about choosing every day to be better than the worst thing you'd ever done. She carried her scars like armor, wore her guilt like a reminder, and saved lives with hands that had once taken one. Because in the end, we're all just broken people trying to do less damage than was done to us. And sometimes, on the good days, we succeed.